Hey everyone, welcome to another special workshop with a guest from the industry. Today we have joining us Natalie Warner. Lives in here it is. Okay, here's my autopilot. Natalie lives in the UK and she is a person who has always been around fiber and needles and thread and yarn, and she is a specialist in knitwear design and design development, garment construction, garment fitting, pattern cutting, hand and machine knitting, and crochet. She has worked for a lot of important people and companies, and she is currently working to teach people within the industry how to design garments that fit all size bodies well. I am super pleased to have her join us today to talk about how tech editors can help designers with innovation in their designs. Natalie, take it away.
Wow, well, thank you very much, Sarah. That's quite the intro. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So hi, thanks for having me inside the Tech Editor Hub today. Yeah, so I wanted to make this as conversational as possible. I mean, don't feel like you have to I don't want it to be a stand and deliver type of get together. I mean, definitely, please talk to me because I feel that the conversational part of these things is lacking. There's so much nuance you can't get on social media and email and things like that. So definitely please unmute. And if you're watching on replay, please feel free to email me as well or message me. I'm on Instagram at Natalie in Stitches, and my email address is natalie@natalieinstitches.com. I'll put that in the chat at some point as well. But yeah, please definitely don't be a stranger. And if anything pops into your head whilst, anything I say resonates or you want to ask me more about it, then please do, because I think in a way, in a sort of meta kind of way, that's what I want to happen more often. And when designers and tech editors work together as well. It's about deepening that conversation and realizing that editors are designers as well in more ways than I think they give themselves credit for. So, right, so I think what I will probably begin with is the way that I tend to, or the way that I came up understanding how designing and editing, the whole design production or pattern production process, if you like, comes together. And this is a bit informed by my training at the London College of Fashion. This is how I grew up seeing it work when I was studying it there. So it will vary a little bit from what we've seen in the hand knit and crochet industries as well. But I will just pop it up on the screen just for a bit of context. So this is the kind of thing that I got used to believing would happen within designs being produced. So it was a sense of having three key people who would work on the production of a pattern for purchase, or three main roles. Within the main fashion industry, it's broken down into even more detail, but this is how I saw it for knit and crochet. So we have the designer, which is probably the most visible role. They come up with the ideas, and they do all the development, photography, modeling, all that kind of creative input. And then we have the technical editor, which is what I know many of you here doing. You've got a lot of detail in your role, checking that there are no numerical or programming errors. You apply the style sheets. You make sure that other knitters can understand what we're talking about and that we actually express things the way we say we're going to express them in the style sheets. All these, safe pair of hands jobs that we couldn't work without you with. And the third one, which I kind of feel is currently split between the designer and the technical editor, is pattern grading. And I know there's been a lot of talk about this in recent years because of talking about body shape and size inclusivity and so on. And it's a role that I hope will become as well differentiated as it is in, say, the wider clothes making industry, so that we can just deliver better patterns and better designs for everybody who wants to make their own clothes. And this already exists within sewing patterns at all kinds of levels, whether people use software or send it to a person to oversee it manually. But within the grader role, this is, as I said briefly, it's split between the designer and the tech editor currently. And this depends also on what you're comfortable doing as tech editors, and also what the designer is able to do and understands by the role. But the ones that the roles or the points within this little bubble or the Venn diagram that I feel are really important and where you can have really meaningful conversations in supporting innovation are having a creative eye for detail in order to scale design features or pattern repeats correctly, and also giving important feedback to the designer about the quality of fit. So before I go on, I should probably have asked this a few moments ago. I'll just come off of screen share so that I can see you all and talk to you. But how many of you already edit garment patterns? 2, 3, 4 of you. Okay. So how has it been for you so far when working with designers on their garments, their sweaters, their cardigans? I'll start with you, Annie, because you're at the top row of my screen.
Alphabet always gets me. It's been good, actually. I do grading as well as tech editing. So I have a variety of clients that reach out to me for different aspects of the process. And so when you're speaking about like the way that you can have some creativity and interaction with the innovation of the project, I find that some of my clients will reach out to me and say, hey, I did this swatch. I have this idea. Can you talk to me about how I should think about this while I'm making my one sample so that I am able to later send it to you and you can grade it and have it work? And I love that interaction at that level. It took a couple of years to get to that point of trust and knowledge with these clients, but it's, you know, the point where you can start talking about, okay, so on your sample, you're thinking about having a panel. Do you want that panel to be a vertical panel that goes like collar width? Do you want it to be bust point to bust point? Do you want it to go the full width of the shoulders? How can that scale? If it has texture in it, how are we going to make that work? And so I usually will just come back with sort of fit points in mind and say, here's what we should be thinking about from the get-go. And so that sort of relationship is a ton of fun. And I find that it actually makes the grade go more easily, and then the edit's easier. So it's something I really encourage. If you can get to that point, it's totally worthwhile.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That's music to my ears, Annie. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jen, I think you're next in my line.
So I'm fairly new to tech editing. I just started about a year ago. I have graded one pattern for someone. That was a lot, but I've taken a class, and my hope is to continue to. I would love to be at this stage where Annie is, where I can provide more feedback and information and help to designers. But what I guess the one thing that I would add is that maybe because I'm fairly new to the entire process, and maybe this is a naive observation, but from the clients that I've had so far, you know, a few have been in the industry for a long time and are skilled, but I'm also seeing other both new designers, but others who've been in the business for a while, who I feel like there's a lack of help out there for people and a lack of information. And I see conversations, you know, online, where it seems like people are searching. They're searching for how to do it, you know, and it feels like this amorphous thing out there. And you certainly, Natalie, are one of those sources that we point people to. And but I do feel like there's the need for more you know, more instruction, more classes, that people want it. So both I see that from the tech editor side for me personally, and on the designer side.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for, I think, treading new ground as well. Not just in, defining roles and giving people access to not just information, but also transformation as well, because there's so much stuff out there that you can read or think tutorials and things, but really what you want and what you get through practical experience, just as Annie was saying, and what you will undoubtedly get as well, is I think it's a kind of learning and on the job training that you get through actually getting the jobs, I think. And I think that I would hope that this doesn't put people off from trying, because sometimes it's the only way to learn. I mean, in fashion industry, generally, when I was studying there again, they I've only in the UK at least, I don't know how it is in the States and Canada, but it's only very recently that they've actually offered formal training for pattern grading. It was always something that you got into through by dint of working in the industry. You would be a pattern cutter, and then perhaps you might segue into work at a grading bureau, which is something I naively thought existed in the knit and crochet industry. And then you would have that kind of specialist training on the job, being, not necessarily apprenticed, but seeing the work come in, maybe assisting on the job, and then gradually building up like that. So I love that you mentioned that, Jen, and Annie as well, just the importance of, working with the designer and building up that relationship. It's so important for people to realize that there's more than one way to learn, and sometimes the best way to learn is not necessarily by books and tutorials at all. But yeah, thank you so much for saying that, Jen. I appreciate it. Sarah, did you have your hand up as well?
Oh, which one?
Oh, sorry, Sarah
Sarah
without
Greer.
the H.
Okay.
Sorry.
I didn't want to do garments. I didn't want to tech edit garments, but that's what was coming. And so I was applying for all the things. And I've done quite a few sweaters now. All seamless, mostly with beginning designers, and they need a lot of help. One had graded her own. It was a little bit of a mess, but we got through it. I've not taken the grading class. I will be taking one this spring. But we got through it. I love the math, so we were able to get through that one. And then another one that I've got right now, and she's stuck in this box because the stitch pattern repeat is, it's limiting her. So we're working through that. But yeah, a lot of new beginning designers that I really enjoy working with them and helping them flourish and get along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's lovely. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned about the stitch repeats. I think that was something that came up when I was running my pilot course as well. I think that it's the applied maths, I think, of pattern repeats, I think gets people. I think that sometimes you think more of patterns in terms of discrete units, let's say 4 plus 6, when really it's something that needs to be worked out more algebraically so that you can account for variables as well. And I mean, this is something that popped into my head after, I think, a conversation with some of my own students on the pilot course. But how do designers feel, Sarah, without the H, when you talk to them about the applied math side of it and digging into the variables that make their patterns work? Or do you find that there's quite a reliance on, this is the stitch pattern, I picked it from a stitch dictionary, and this is as far as I'm going to go with it? What happens in practice for you?
There's been quite a reliance on it so far. Thankfully, the sweater's not pieced. It's seamless from the top down, so that helps a lot. But if you're not willing to deal with like half of a stitch repeat, your sleeves are going to be bigger or smaller and may not fit the standards. But it's an opportunity to teach the stitcher then how they can make the piece to fit themselves. And that's the other end of this conversation, I think, too, is not only equipping the designers, but equipping them well enough to equip the stitchers.
I love that.
I absolutely Agree with that. So, Natalie, I have a question in regards to stitch patterns. What have you found people do with the thing that comes up to me pretty often with sort of complicated textures in a garment or a complicated stitch pattern that has, I'm going to take, for example, a cable garment that has two different cables. I have worked with designers who have graded things so that they just make the cable repeat more times. I've worked with people who change the cable from like a 4-stitch to a 6-stitch cable and then to an 8-stitch cable. And so they're sort of scaling up the cable as the circumference of the body gets bigger. I've also worked with people who will, if they have an alternating 2 different cables, will put in extra repeats of one of them. And I found all of those are ways that they've tried to accomplish getting a finished circumference that fits the smooth grade with even increments. What are your thoughts on that kind of an approach where each one of the sizes may look slightly different, but hit the grade target versus trying to keep the garments looking exactly the same, like one center panel that's always a certain width on the body, but may actually be executed slightly differently?
Yeah. You're speaking my language. Yeah. I believe first and foremost that as the design as it's photographed, every knitter who knits it, regardless of the size they pick up, should expect to get something that compositionally is the same. And I think that that involves like really sure management of the proportions and the ratios of the artistic elements, the stitch patterns, basically. And so what that means for me, for example, I'm thinking, you mentioned cable, so I've now got in my head something like a traditional Aran sweater that might have a central panel and then something like a diamond or whatever else you might put there. And so what I would tend to do is, I think there's a lot of subtlety as well. It's not just the cable panels, it's also the gaps between them that you can work on as well. And so sometimes that can make things more painstaking in that you think, okay, maybe this design might have 2 stitches between each cable, maybe for this one, because it's such a small increment, especially with the neck, because necks don't grow very much from side to side. You maybe don't need to adjust the size of the number of stitches in the cable, maybe just put in a couple of 2 more purl stitches, one either side, and then you can get what you want in that area. But I think the thing that anchors me is how much the body grows in particular parts. I've kind of alluded to it with the neck, because we know that necks, as people gain or lose weight, because they're primarily bone and sinuous muscle, they are not going to get very much bigger from size to size as, say, the stomach or the bust or the upper arm circumference, for example. Sites like that where you can expect to have a lot of fat and muscle, possibly, again, depending on body shape. There's always caveats for these things. But I would always assess each design on its merits and think, well, maybe I need to adjust the cable size in the center where the neck is, because maybe I don't need to, for example, so I should say, because there's not much growth between the grade increment is quite small. But say for somewhere else, perhaps I might change something as well, but maybe change the size of the cable or make the panels slightly wider there, for example. So I draw an awful lot as well. I think I do an awful lot of drawing and an awful lot of swatching. And for cable designs like that, where there's lots of, it's kind of a polyphonic kind of thing, if I can put it musically. You've got lots of different repeats and multiples and factors going on in there. And one thing I do when I design is I knit each panel separately and then just move them around, have a look at, how it works. I've got my sketch there. I've got the panels separately rather than as one big unit. I save that until last so that I can think about, oh, okay, well, this is still faithful to what I have in mind for how I want it to be. It still is, it still works in terms of composition. No one's going to feel like what they get is different from how I photographed it. And if it is, then you make that explicit and say, for these sizes, you'll have another cable here. Just tell people what to expect as well. Photograph it, sample knitters, test knitters, that kind of thing, just to help people see, okay, this is how the design works. And I think that kind of diligence helps, because when you it makes it to you as a tech editor, and then eventually it makes it out to the knitter, they're going to trust whatever you've put in there, that what they make is going to be, they've been looked after, essentially. And so I think that the kind of metacognition that comes with design, the thinking about how you resolve a problem and realizing that each design is going to have its own character, if you will. I think that for me is the big key. I think that there's a lot of perhaps reliance on, percentages and formulas, especially for certain constructions. In a way, it's not how you want to think about a design. It's an original piece of work. Therefore, it requires you to think in an original way about how you get to it. So I suppose that's a very convoluted way of saying that each project is different. And so I'm thinking right from the off, when I've got a design, how is that going to be able to work when I grade it? And that, for me, this helps me to determine whether it's going to be published or not. If I can't see how to get it to work, if I can't confer with anybody about it, and in some ways perhaps you need to talk to editors long before you've written the pattern up. I feel like there needs to be more of a consultative role as well. But basically, if I look at the idea generation stage of things and think, well, how is this going to work? Can I talk to anybody? If I can't see a way through it, then perhaps the design is just something really nice that needs to go in the bin. And sometimes that's sad, but it's fair, and you'll just have to come up with something else. And that has happened to me, absolutely. But you get better from it, definitely.
I would like to second that this is something that our industry has or that's missing a little bit in our industry that maybe the fashion industry or has already in place, is there's a team of people talking about design. And I know you and I have talked about this a lot, Natalie, but I feel like this is something that needs to come into play big time, is that we are not siloed as, oh, I'm a designer, I do this, okay, and then I send it to the tech editor and they're completely separate and they do their work. Or I'm the designer and then I send it to the grader and then it goes to the tech editor. But there needs to be more conversation, I think, before, and I don't know how to make that financially feasible. But I feel like a lot of us who are tech editors, this could be a way to support our business better, is to provide these kind of consulting things. And I've done this a lot where I'll just talk with the designer for 45 minutes. They'll show me their sketch, they'll show me their stitch pattern, they'll say, how would I grade this part for this size? And we do a lot of problem solving up front. Like, where am I going to have these sticky points in this design? And then when they go design, then they've already solved a lot of the issues before the grading happens and before tech editing happens. And it just makes the whole process smoother. And I'm wondering, Natalie, if we can discuss, maybe were in the fashion industry a long time before you came into the hand knitting and crocheting industry. How do we pull what's good there, but still kind of remain a little bit of the Wild West that we are, so that allows people like that Sarah's working with that are brand new to come into this space and kind of get their feet wet and still feel like they're being supported?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think that's definitely what's needed. I mean, part of it is to educate designers better, which is what I'm just desperately trying to do, and I just cannot work fast enough on it. I really can't, because the kind of things because it means that you're doing a lot of heavy lifting as tech editors. I mean, you're doing the two jobs, and I think to go back to what you were saying before about consultancy. I think part of how that gets alleviated within clothing and fashion in general is that you have a dedicated team of people who are around each other all the time. And even though that is partly to do with lead times and whatnot, it's this is people who are just around each other a lot. It's more of a continuous working relationship rather than something project-based in which people come together, share their skills and expertise to get something made, and then they go their separate ways. It tends to be a bit more kaleidoscopic the way we work now. And one thing that I would really love to change as part of or see change as part of a working culture is just to have more longer term relationships with your editors and stuff. And I think that there's probably a few ways that designers can do that, that you can take maybe historically from the fashion industry. So there's I'm thinking like way back, when before they had fashion weeks, fashion designers would just invite people to their ateliers, and just present their ideas. So things that weren't necessarily finished, but to a stage where you can say, okay, this is what I'm making, this is what I'm going to be producing in this collection, and it's going to be coming at you in whatever season it is. And I think that creating a space for people to see what you're working on, perhaps if people could be more comfortable and not feel like something has to be really pretty and polished, because, design is ugly, it's messy, it's chaotic. And I think one of my pet hates is that it's presented as this magical person, like this Wizard of Oz type figure who just goes behind the curtain and cranks out a pattern and suddenly it's all magical. And it's absolutely not. I'll happily do anything possible to dispel that myth. But I think that letting people in at those early stages to say, this is what I'm working on, and it could be a community-based thing. You could say, open up to some tech editors, some people who already like your work, who are on your mailing list, people who will always reply to you, those kinds of people who already really like you, to make the space feel really safe, I think. Because I think the vulnerability and feeling and worrying about what people think of you is really toxic as far as creativity is concerned. And so I think, that's just one idea, but it's a possibility. I think that's something that you could work with as a designer, because many of them have Patreon communities, or maybe Ko-fi or something like that, where people are meeting up with them every month or every fortnight anyway. And so maybe having something where people can just come up, you can say, this is what I'm working on, what do you think? And at that point, you could have a tech editor possibly that you might want to work with come into the meeting anyway and just chat and make it not necessarily a focus group or anything particularly rigorous or formal like that, but just to get everybody involved, because everyone has a stake in it in some ways. And the people who are going to knit the patterns eventually, I think they would really love that, to see what goes on behind things. Just a week or two ago, I put up what I called the ugly cardigan, or the back of an ugly cardigan, on Instagram. It's this gold thing that's got this massive cable, and it was just a design idea that I had that I've been sitting on for a year because it needs work, but I needed to talk to other people about it. So I put it on the grid, and I just said, okay, I'm fed up of looking at this. It's been folded up for a year now. There's no reason why I have to work through it on my own, especially after it's been that long. Just get people involved. And the comments were amazing. And people were really, really supportive. I explained, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm stuck here. What are your thoughts? Just have at it. And I didn't get trashed at all. I know that possibly some people might think, well, that's easy for you to say. Look at all the, you just empty your brain onto your blog for fun. But, I'm still a human being as well. If people don't like something, and a few people didn't, they said, no, that's ugly. It's fine, because, you have to, I think, when you open yourself up like that, you have to remember that feedback means that you're worth a response. I think it's not so much negativity, it's apathy you need to worry about. It's when people have nothing to say about it, or if it doesn't resonate with them, or if they don't connect with it emotionally, that's when you know that, okay, I need to go back to this. But when people do have an emotional response to something, or something to say, I think that's brilliant, this is what you're looking for, you want that human connection through your design, this is what we want to do. It's why you edit things to make sure that they get to a high standard, so that people aren't disappointed after they have picked up the pattern and thought, yeah, I want to make this. And I think that is the kind of thing that I would really love to see more of from designers. There is a lot of, having things look really lovely and polished and professionally photographed, but really the mess and is where the magic is. That's my view. And the community that you have here, yeah, love that you put that in the caption. It's exactly where I was going. Means that you can actually get all that out. And what I have found from running the pilot course is that this is what the designers there who've taken it have really appreciated. And I think we need more of it for designers, so they realise that you don't have to be an alchemist or a wizard. You're a human, and part of being human means that you're on a road to travel. Absolutely.
I also want to
And
address the fact that of what you mentioned to Sarah is that the more you do it, the more the magic happens.
Mm.
And I think there is something beautiful. I'm thinking back to when I first started grading knitting patterns. I knew how to grade in a flat pattern. And making that jump into stretchy fabrics and knitting and hand knitting was painful. But the only way that I did it was by doing it. And so I feel like there needs to be a lot more space for us to learn and make mistakes and ask questions. Even like, I know Jen is here and she just did her first grade, but she asked a lot of questions in the community. And I feel like this is super, super valuable. We need to feel like we're able to ask as tech editors, hey, I don't know everything. And can you help me? Can you send me a resource for this math? How do I check this? Or how do I do this part? And I think it needs to be okay to make mistakes and to be growing. And we're not perfect. This is super, super important to all of us getting better at this.
It's so true. And I feel like that's maybe what I feel lacking is that opportunity. And I fully agree. It'll come with practice, but also, and I think this maybe speaks to Natalie, what you were talking about, the teamwork that exists in more on the fashion industry side. Like I would love to see, and I would pay to do this, to see another tech editor, Annie or Bronwyn or Sarah, Sarah, all the Sarahs, do a Zoom and walk us through a grade. Like, we'll just walk us through what were the key things that you were thinking about, and oh, this thing was really interesting. Let me tell you about that. Here's an issue that I came up with, or that the designer and I encountered, and here are the 3 ways that we were contemplating fixing it, and here's why we went with the final decision. It's all of those nuances that yes, I know that I will learn as I do more work, but I'll learn faster, and I'll learn more creative ways of approaching the problems by having those walkthroughs and hearing how others think about it. I think that's what I would love to see and see happen.
The problem I see with this, Jen, is people like to hold everything close. So like I've had grading experiences in the last 6 months, and I thought, oh, I'll share this with the community, but the designers don't want anybody to see what they're working on. So it's like I get stuck because it's like, so do I pay the designer to be able to share their intellectual property, to be able to discuss how we went through this process and like, all the stripies, how did we do the stripes and the yoke, and that's where the hiccup is like, okay, so how do we get over this thing of I don't want to share what I'm doing because somebody might copy it.
I think what Natalie said earlier about the wizard behind the curtain is part of that same issue. I have found that I have some clients who are happy to talk about it because they're brand new designers. And they're like, I don't have that magic. I am happy to give credit and to say, I don't grade. I don't do this myself. I don't do it in a vacuum. But there are other designers who are more established, who have been producing for years, have maybe hundreds of patterns that are out there, and are less willing to be vulnerable. Even though they've done it 100 times, I still have to rely on someone to either help me through a sticky point in grading, or my tech editor to be like, hey, your sleeves are way too big. This doesn't work. Can you take it back and try it again? People don't like to be vulnerable in that way. And I agree, we need the culture shift, the change for people to be able to say, I didn't produce this in a vacuum. And Sarah, with an H's point, like, it's really tough when people are protective of their IP and scared that it's going to get copied. I mean, that's their business, it's their livelihood, and I fully respect that. I have found that some of my clients are more willing to allow me to talk about my role in their designing process. Again, some of the designers that are really just getting going when the pattern has been published. So after it's out there in the world, I've gotten permission from some of my clients to talk about it. And, you know, Sarah, at one point we had talked about me doing exactly what Jen is asking for, and I just haven't had the time to like put together that class. But I will say, if anybody wants to talk to me about it, I can probably find an hour here or there rather than, you know, the 20 hours necessary to make a course. So I'm happy to be one of those resources, like Natalie's saying, we're lacking, because I totally agree. It's so valuable to pull the curtain back, make the wizard come out. So yeah.
You need to go over to the bulletin board and just say that.
Okay, I will. I'll do that right when we're done.
I mean, I was kind of thinking actually, Annie, I don't think what you were just saying about finding the time to record a course. I think the format is key, just having it so that it's just a live thing, because I think that what people really appreciate is just like seeing and hearing you think out loud as you go through your work. I mean, certainly when I've had that kind of running commentary going through my spreadsheets, and, you know, setting them up and getting them graded and stuff, I mean, I feel like I'm just gibbering on, really. But that's what people have appreciated it, because that's as close as they can get to being inside my head. And I kind of feel like doing that in a kind of like live webinar or workshop kind of format rather than something pre-recorded, because that's what so many courses are these days. I think we forget that there's so many different ways that we can learn, and perhaps pre-recorded is just not the way to go. That if you have something that is maybe seasonal or a couple times a year, maybe when you can both get time in your diaries, it can be a series of things, or it can just be a one-off thing, you know, what if that kind of format. I think that's probably what's best for it, because, you know, people can watch it on replay if they want to, but I think that real-time conversation where people can actually ask you questions as things come into your head, that's the interaction that you need. It's really passive when you get pre-recorded stuff. It's just not the same at all. So I think that definitely there's room for that. I think people are really hungry for community as well, especially after COVID and lots of virtual learning and just, you know, static environments. You know, it's one thing being able to be at home, but you need still that social side of things.
And it's going exactly to what we're talking about a little bit, right? Because, you know, as much as I love formal classes, and I will never say no to a formal class, it's messy, and that's what we're wanting. And I think I love that idea of maybe reframing it more as like just a live workshop, where it is interactive, and where we can ask questions and just hearing it, you know, and not to say no to the other, just there are so many possibilities for format and how it could happen.
I think there also, that points to the fact that there is no one right answer, like you were alluding to earlier, Jen, about how, you know, we were tossing around these 3 different solutions, and this is why we came to this one and liked this one in particular. I have to say though, Natalie, I'm a little bit wary of doing a live workshop and actually building a spreadsheet there, because I feel like spreadsheets are, it's like being inside my brain, and I feel like someone needs an NDA or like a disease test before they come that far into my life. It's incredibly intimate to look at someone's spreadsheet. So that just, it made me laugh when you were like, as I'm building a spreadsheet, and I was like, oh, that's very personal.
We all feel this. We're all cringy. We're like, oh yeah, no, don't look at my spreadsheet. Don't look at it.
I have to admit, Sarah told me exactly not to do that when I was talking with her, when I was establishing the design, because she said pre-record it and do commentary, and I just thought, I can see why you advised that, but I just said I can't. I'm just gonna go hell for leather here. But this is the thing. People really liked it. They liked when I fluffed things. They liked when I you know, because they could just point stuff out, and it really let them in. I mean, I did say I didn't say anything about an NDA. I did say this is a very dubious privilege you're about to get. So if it's not quite what you're looking for, just you know, you can go if you want. But it's something that people really don't get, but they would really love it, honestly. I mean, I think every time I did that in the class, I mean, it made it longer because they were so fascinated by it and they had so many questions. But I think in some ways they wouldn't have known to have those questions unless they had seen me build it out. I mean, I think that there's a few different ways to build spreadsheets and format them. I mean, I tend to do it so that I have well, it's probably a more common sense thing to do it anyway for Excel, but the sizes going across the top, and then all my different, down the A column, I have the labels of what everything is, etc. in the middle. And so I would say, okay, well, referring back to all this is why I'm going for this one. This is why I want this dimension, that one, that one, that one, that one, going through it all like that, brick by brick. But it helped. They all loved Excel, even the people who would, were ready to just stick to pen and paper, honestly. So I don't think you need to worry about that at all, Annie. You won't frighten people. You will make friends, trust me. But I think that this is the kind of, this is how you innovate things, really. You just show people, you just let people in. And I think that this is how, what all of you have said at the very beginning about how you support designers. It is just letting them into your world, letting them feel comfortable about talking to them about, what they're struggling with. But I think that, and that's been so effective. It sounds like it's been really ideal, and it's helped you gain so much trust, and deservedly so. And what I think it points to is that, okay, this was good. Now you need to do more of it and more of it and more of it until people realize actually it's normal. And what you're afraid of. I think when you imagine something, you make it worse than it actually is because you've got no frame of reference. But then when you actually get into it, then you realize actually, why did I hold myself back? Yeah. Yeah. So,
Natalie, just as a time check, we only have about 15 more minutes. Is there something that, just giving you, in case there's something specific you wanted to cover?
Yeah. No, I think the only other thing that I would probably I was going to ask. I mean, I love how this conversation has gone. It's been so much richer than I could ever have hoped for. Was talking about sort of body shapes and working in shaping details for those. What kind of questions have you had? I mean, this is something, just to lay my cards out on the table, just give you a bit more context. I mean, I included a special module for dart manipulation for my design course. I put one in not just for bust darts, but also for raglan darts and pointed to shoulder darts if anybody happened to need those. There's a lot of focus on anatomy for my ones, that people can build in space for those features within those designs instead of trying to retrofit them, which is generally always a disaster. And getting people to understand that you can put darts anywhere and manipulate them however you want, but how you do that needs to be with recourse to the integrity of your design, rather than here's a dart. I normally see them poking towards the side seam underarm area. This is where they must always be, and they should always be short rows. So that's the kind of thing that I'm teaching people, that it doesn't work like that. It's called manipulation for a reason. So with that in mind, have any knitters come to you about including darts or any specialist shaping features in their garments? And if they have, what kind of things have they brought to the table with their designs? What questions have they had for you?
I think the questions is when, like, when do you and how do you do it? So if it isn't this, is it adding more stitches at the front for larger sizes? If you're designing for people who have breasts, I think there is a huge disconnect especially for newer designers, between in understanding how body shapes change from the smallest sizes that are adult to the largest that are possible on a human form with breasts. So how, like, and so then there's a lot of when it comes to, okay, so then how do I do a circular yoke? Where does the armhole shaping happen? and I think that anatomy puzzle is very scary. And so then they basically back off. They're like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to put it in bust starts. I don't want to add this because I feel like I don't have the knowledge of the bodies.
I would 100% agree with that and echo it, Sarah. I think the biggest thing that I see when I'm editing a pattern that's been graded by a designer, especially designers that have been doing this for 10, 15 years and are used to grading their own patterns the same way they always have. Maybe from before there was as detailed information about body shapes across different sizes. The things that I see the most are placement of any sort of bust shaping, especially as bodies get larger. In regards to the armhole, especially, a lot of times I think people think that bodies with breasts have breasts that are higher than the armhole split all the time. And it doesn't work that way. The other one that I see all the time is length from like an armhole split to natural waist or narrowest part of the body. And I've, from studying sizing and fit models, that depth actually gets shorter on most bodies as they grow in circumference, and people can't seem to get their minds around that. I see all of these cropped sweaters coming to hit the market, and a crop will get shorter, in body length from armhole to hem as the sizes get larger in full circumference if you're trying to hit the natural waist. People cannot get that around in their heads. They think it just has to get longer. And I fully admit that a lot of test knitters will make it longer, or a lot of knitters will prefer it to be longer. So there's a preference thing there too. But if it's designed to be cropped, it needs to be graded as such. The same with an oversized sweater, like a drop shoulder design. The sleeves are going to get shorter as you get larger, and people just sort of, how does that work? When it's got a ton of ease, the sleeve has to get shorter, and they just cannot get their minds around that. So I think there's a gap in, body sizes across the range of what we see, and how do we actually relate one to the other, and that a grade doesn't always go from small to large. Sometimes it goes large to small, and that means that it'll actually fit better. So I think there's another hole in the process. So to get back to your point, Natalie, I think placement of and relationship between different things, when you're sort of looking at forest for trees versus looking at trees in the forest, people have trouble with that sort of thing. So I see that a lot.
Thank you. Because this is something that I was really interested in talking with you about as well, is understanding how 2D fabric relates to a 3D body. And I think that one of the things that was interesting, I think there were a couple of exercises where I've got people to just work with paper and cut that out and get that into a form, is understanding that fabric, when you grade something, it's going to move in two possible directions. It's going to have to do something vertically, and it's going to have to do something horizontally. And then to find out exactly how it's going to behave, you have to actually just do some draping or of some form. It doesn't have to be perfect necessarily, but you do have to observe how the fabric behaves. It's kind of like turn of cloth. This was not how I explained it when teaching people, but if I fold, say, a piece of paper thin like this, if I fold that, then the crease is going to be very tiny, very narrow, very flat. If I get a piece of card or several sheets of paper, for example, and try to fold them, then this area here is not going to be narrow and skinny anymore. It's going to actually have a length assigned to it in order to bend around. And even just little things like that. I mean, that would be something that's handy for, say, a lapel or a revere collar like this shawl collar has here, because it's not going to be just the depth you work to and then the fall as you get from the stand. It's this little bit here that helps it to turn over, those little nuances of working with cloth. And this was something that I found was, that people hadn't really thought about quite so much. Some people that had a sewing background already and had worked with those kind of garment features had got it. But I had realized that even though you have roll neck collars or shawl collars in knitting, for example, that the way that fabric behaves when it's sculpted and has to assume a 3D shape, not just fit over someone's 3D body, is something that is still missing for people. And I do wonder sometimes whether it is worth it if people also somehow learn draping, or maybe learn enough about sewing and how fabric behaves to support that. Because knitting, you are creating fabric, you're constructing it, but it's still fabric, and you can still use, you know, shop bought fabric or jersey to support that in some way. Yeah, Jen, you had your hand up.
Just listening, it's making me think about, I mean, there'll be nothing will ever take away the experience of draping fabric, but in this day and age with, I'm thinking about the ASTM models, the body models, or would you call this cookies? I don't know. If there was some, you know, software technology where you could, because we have spreadsheets with the sizes of the garments we expect people to make, right? For some sort of modeling program that could reflect that and then superimpose on body, just as you're saying, like Annie, to be able to see like, oh yeah, that sleeve is going to end up at their fingertips, or, you know, just trying to, if I feel like it would be really cool if there was some sort of technology that could do that. I don't know. In the sewing industry, do they do much like computer modeling of shapes or designs? Or
yeah, I mean, there is a program called Clo 3D that people use. You try and find it. And it's fashion design software, and people who've been asking for them to do more with knit fabrics for a really long time now. I'm just going to whack it in the chat. It helps you to model things on a body, so it's a bit like my body model in that you can input dimensions in. It'll generate a 3D form for you, or you can have someone stand in a 3D body scanner and put it in that way. But it helps you to mock things up so you can see things in 360, and you can put in qualities about the fabrication and whatnot, cut of it, and it will relate it to flat patterns if you're also working with them as well. That's the closest thing that I have found to actually working with a form of some kind, whether it's a half scale one or a full scale one, or someone that you have just dragged aside for 10 minutes to pin fabric onto. You know, it will all help, even no matter how you fashion it together. But that is the closest thing that I have found. I mean, it is a subscription only package, so it's not the most accessible, but that's the only thing that I have found that does it really well. But they have demos of it on YouTube that you can see, and it's as good as it has as I've found, definitely. But yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that I think is missing from it, and I think this was something that I got my designers to do at the beginning of the design development course, was to get them to just pay more attention to the stuff they already have and are already wearing, because that's something that's already made up. It doesn't have to be something that's knitted, because it's, you know, you might be making the clothing using various methods. It could be knitted, it could be crocheted, it could be, you know, any kind of fabric, but it's all clothing the same body. And so that's the information, that's the common factor between it all. So how does this fabric behave? If it's heavier, if it's lighter, if it's wool, if it's cotton, and then observing how that looks. How's it been worn in? Has anything stretched over time with wear and tear, that kind of thing, and observing, and then taking that knowledge back to the table when you start working on a design. So, okay, I've had this jumper, it's a few years old, it's got this kind of styling, this is how it's aged. How can I use the knowledge from having lived in it and apply that to a design that I want to create and innovate? And that was eye-opening as well. You know, there's lots of key information that people can already derive from the clothes that they own. You don't have to start from scratch, you know, just because it's a new design at all.
And I think as tech editors, I think there's a huge amount of value in our own making. As knitters and crocheters, I think we can create and make and pay attention to other people's bodies, how clothing fits, how does this, if we choose to make a pattern for ourselves, okay, what were the hiccupy points in here, and what I've learned so much through my own making that transfers directly into my editing and my grading. And I think it can be a form of professional development to go and create for ourselves using patterns and exploring different construction shapes, sizes, darts, short rows. If in, you know, in the crochet world, maybe we do want to make that bikini for this summer and see how it fits.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think one of the benefits of just like even just trying things on and looking at what you already have is that the fabric is already there. When we knit and crochet, like you know, we make the fabric at the same time. We don't have it all starts from string. And so all the engineering is built into it as we create it. It's not like say clothes making with dress fabrics where you cut the shape out and then you apply whatever techniques you want to it construction wise. You obviously can choose different fabrications or different properties of fabric when you get it home, but the rest of it, the actual building and engineering of it, that's in the construction. And then with us, we often do many things at the same time where, you know, you could, if it's made all in one piece and you're constructing it as well as shaping it to fit, etc. There's a lot going on simultaneously, I think, that people don't always give themselves credit for. I mean, one, that's really complex from a clothes making point of view, but also, you know, having many plates in the air, so to speak, when you're designing. So you're not only, you know, working maybe something seamless or raglan shaped, you're thinking, okay, how can this be adjusted at this point? How would I do that? And it's not just, you know, unpicking a seam necessarily, it's ripping it right back and thinking, okay, what do I need to do differently this time? And again, that's part of it as well. That's part of the mess that we were talking about earlier. And I think that, you know, usually when you have a project of your own that you've bought from another designer, you don't mind ripping it back sometimes. Like, okay, I did that bit wrong. I don't want to do it differently. I'll rip it back. But I think you have to embrace that within your own design work as well. I mean, you know, I have certainly ripped out loads of things. I mean, I talked about, you know, my swatch box. It's not a swatch box of doom necessarily, but it's where I keep all the stuff that I either needed to create to get to the destination or things that just plain didn't work out. But I think it's not so much seeing them as mistakes, it's understanding that unraveling means the same whether you created the pattern or not. It's just you thinking and doing at the same time. You know, if you write something down on paper and cross it out, you don't think, oh, I'm rubbish, I can't write. You just move on to the next space in the paper to write. I think we have to do more of that when we design and realize it's okay. And it also means that you hopefully won't have to do quite so much pastoral care when you work with designers who are afraid of their own creative strength and not realizing that what they're going through is normal because they don't talk to each other. I mean, you do so much support as editors. It's really amazing.
So we're at the
Before
top of the, oh, go ahead, Jen.
Well, I was gonna say before we close, will you tell us about what you're wearing? Because that neckline is gorgeous, and I want to know
Yes.
you're wearing.
Yeah, this is my Karin sweater. I'm just going to stand up a little bit. So it's got a sort of like sort of 50s, 60s kind of collar. I'll just turn around so you can see.
Look
And
at the raglan line.
yeah, so this one I gave it quite a deep raglan. It's meant to hit between the armhole and waist. So it's quite slouchy in that sense. I just wanted it to be that number one go-to cozy jumper. And then I put in some short rows to turn the shoulder more comfortably so that it's not pulling and the neck actually stays stable and things like that. So thank you.
So Natalie, would you tell us what you are working on and how some of us might be interested in it? And I'm going to put in your website, and I highly recommend that you all subscribe to her newsletter. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm inspired now to derail my plans to come up with alterations resources for knitters and try and open up a community based on what we were talking about, just little webinars and just get-togethers and things, to talk about patterns. I feel like we need more of that. I think that's the thing that I feel more inspired to do, which was not in the plan at all. I would rather work on that. But what I should be doing is getting ready for the next round of my design course in October this year. So I'll be doing a live round of it in October. But what I also hope to do is to record self-paced modules to make it more flexible for people who maybe don't want to take the whole course or maybe on the other side of the world and things like that. And yeah. But I think one of the things I'm really keen on is just having more conversations like this. I feel like we don't have enough of them in the industry. There's lots of blogs. I hold up my hand and say I'm very guilty of adding to the multitude of blog articles out there. I'm sorry. But the conversations, I think, creating more space for those, I think that's something that really lights me up inside. I want to do more of that, and you've inspired me today. So I'm really grateful to have this as a more conversational event rather than stand and deliver. I do much too much of that, and sometimes you just need to talk to people.
Thank you for being here today and for inspiring us to create spaces for our clients that is more open and more of a fellowship in improving design and improving and sharing knowledge rather than keeping us in separate silos. Thank you. I'm inspired. Woof. I don't know if you all are. Do we have any last questions for Natalie before we close for today? Feel free to unmute.
Just saying thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. It's been a lovely afternoon. I'm going to have a very nice, enriching cup of tea after this.
I'm excited to see where the industry is in 10 years because of how far we've come, even since people started talking about how we need to grade higher, maybe in 2017, 2016, when those conversations started in social media. Look how far we've come to 2024. I think there's a huge amount of room for more education and more blog posts. Natalie, please write more. I think there's more room for discussing maths and for not being afraid to share the mess, and for more conversations and how our industry does things differently than the fashion industry, which is okay. So thank you all for being here today and for being part of what is kind of a little mini revolution in creating designs that fit all the shapes, all the sizes, and being a part of the publishing process to support designers in their growth, and also for our own personal growth into becoming maybe a grader. We didn't talk about this much, but I have a lot of colleagues that started out as tech editors and now only grade because that's where their genius zone is. So don't be afraid to step into that space if that's how you feel like, oh, this lights me up. You don't have to tech edit. You can also just grade. So we can talk about that more in the future. I'd like to invite someone who does that to the community to talk. So
And I come. Can I drop in with a pay-as-you-go fee?
Oh,
Just
absolutely. Yeah. I'll let you in. Natalie, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your beautiful viewpoints on this whole aspect of our industry. And I hope to see you around.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely meeting you today. Have a lovely Thursday. And yeah, please say hi. I love it.
I certainly will. Have a great rest of your week, you all, and I'll see you soon in the forum. Happy editing. Bye.